Hi, and welcome to another episode of White and Woke at Work. I'm here today with Meggie Abendschein, all the way in Dallas, Texas, and I'm happy to have her here with me today. Hi, Meggie, how are you?
Hi, Janelle. I'm great. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You are one of those anti-racist personalities that I've come across on LinkedIn, and you've been really, really vocal on the platform and in your stance about anti-racist. Tell me a little bit about that and what makes you so vocal.
Yeah. So I'm vocal because I care a lot about it. I know that's can sound cliche, but it's such an important thing to me, and I think I come from a space where it's really hard for me to understand why it's not so important to everybody, because of the state of our country and how systemic racism is a disease that seeps into every aspect of it. I think on LinkedIn, the space was carved out because as George Floyd was happening, I've always used LinkedIn, and I've kind of thought it was like a little bit of a toxic positivity playground, to be honest.
Yeah.
But so I went on there and I saw people saying things. I was like, yes, oh my gosh, yes. But then I saw the replies and some of the people defending white supremacist things was just, I was just upset. So one of my first posts when I decided, I didn't post much on there, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to say something. And it was about white supremacy on LinkedIn, like the white supremacist culture on LinkedIn and how it's the norm there. And people who are saying perfectly necessary, important things were getting beaten up, and, people of color were getting treated horribly, probably indicative of how most people of color are treated in the workplace,
Yeah.
specifically Black people. And I was horrified. I was horrified how people who are going on there with their jobs, their titles, and freely saying these things, I thought, whew, this is a reckoning. And whatever's happening in the world right now has certainly not reached corporate America.
Yeah. I mean, the
So,
bravery with which people are speaking on the platform
wow.
is unbelievable on both sides, right?
Yeah,
You know, we've
yeah.
got the active anti-racists and people who are speaking out like yourself, but then you're right, you've got those, those racist trolls who, and you can't even call them trolls, like they're doing it openly with their profile photo and their name and their title and the company they work for.
I know.
And it's just without regard or without conscience. It's really appalling, and it's crazy that it's going on
It is.
that extent. But again, it's part of the reason I wanted to do this series, because I think it's so important to try to educate that cohort that speaks so freely, that
Yes.
they just are so inherently racist. They don't even realize that, like, there's no filter for what they think. They're so comfortable in their privilege, right?
100%. Yes. And you bring up I'm sorry, continue.
Go ahead.
You bring up such a good point, because it's easy to go on there and get mad. It's easy to go on all your social platforms and get mad, but it's not helpful if you're not willing to walk toward these hard conversations.
Right.
So I understand there's trolls who you're not going to get anywhere with,
Yeah.
but I especially saw that, I was like, oh, this is where white people need to step up more. We need to be in there saying and defending these. We don't put this on the shoulders of Black people to defend what's happening here. We don't get to come on here, complain, and get all these racist comments in there and just be like, oh, not my problem. We have to be the ones inserting ourselves in these conversations.
And why do you think that is?
Because this is white people. We started this. We did this is the harm. This is the harm of our ancestors. This is 400 years of oppression, and we're just sitting here. We need to do so much. And the first, easiest, simple step is to acknowledge what's happened, what's happening, why it still exists, how bad it is right now. And to not even get there, I can't imagine how frustrating that is for people of color. For me personally, it's maddening to see white people who won't even take that first step, because there's so much more work that needs to be done beyond the acknowledgement.
Yeah. But there's so many people, Meggie, that say, I'm not racist. And my grandparents, my ancestors weren't slave masters. Like, why should they care? Why should they get involved?
So I've had this exact question in conversations with family members, with people who've been in my inner circle. And the answer is that systemic racism isn't even about you, but you do have to acknowledge your part that you play in it. And it's not that it's not about you at all. It can be about you, but systemic racism is a big problem. And we have to acknowledge that it's hurting and infecting every aspect of our culture and hurting Black people. And to take it personally is, what I told a family member who said, I don't like the word white supremacy. I'm like, that I understand that triggers you. I'd love for you to explore why that triggers you, but you're not worrying that one of your family members is going to go get shot by police. Like that, think of that worry. Like you don't have, those worries aren't comparable. So you having a little discomfort, you have to recognize that that's part of this, but you can't get to the work without getting through whatever this little discomfort is. And so I'm going to circle back to why I think that kind of stuff, that white fragility and that privilege and comfort is something that is so exhausting for Black people to have to deal with on a daily basis, that I feel it's so important that white people, that's where we definitely need to step in at the very least, is listening to Black people and then taking and understanding and fighting those little fights that are so exhaustive and traumatic for Black people. That's like where we need to step in. That's my opinion.
I did notice in your profile, you touched on it just briefly, that, you've been having these conversations in your personal life, right? With family members who might not necessarily have this or the same views as you have. Have you been able to like sway anybody?
Yeah.
Or have you like lost relatives that just, you cut them off?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm okay with it. I really was, I've been dedicated or, very passionate about anti-racism, but I think George Floyd pushed, not just George Floyd, but everything that happened in May and June. And I mean, the awakening that happened really pushed everyone to new levels of consciousness about this. And for me, with the election all wrapped into it, it was really, really, there was the tea kettle was boiling and about to steam out. Like, I mean, it was, my family, I am a liberal sheep in a family of very deep-rooted conservative Texans, all white family, very religious. And my parents themselves are more progressive than most. I will give you that, but there's still challenges there. So I did talk to a lot of family members, and all the conversations went differently, but we did end in a place where they understood. What I found is that there's just this unwillingness to talk about racism and how it affects Black people. And most of them don't have friends or anyone in their circle who are Black. And so understanding it is really hard. They're like, I'm not racist. I don't understand how this is my problem.
Right.
And it's just educating them on how you play parts in racist system, how you benefit. Look at your neighborhood. Yeah. Do you have any Black people on your street? Did I go to school with any Black people in my suburban white area? Very few Black people. Yeah. And Dallas is incredibly diverse. So that takes effort to move away and not be around other Black people in Dallas.
Right.
So yes, and I did lose, I did have a family member who really tied up in the religious aspect of it, and how racism, that toxic positivity of going over racism, being like, oh, let's all just be religious and happy and it doesn't exist. We're all here. So I did, we had multiple conversations, and it got to an abusive point, like a religious abusive point, where I had to cut it off a little bit. So yeah, but it's the stuff we have to do. You have to lead by example. And if it means cutting people off who will not listen, I think that's important. The last resort is cutting people out, because you really want to be effective.
So Meggie, part of what I'm doing here is just kind of try to pinpoint precisely when it was that you had this awakening. I know from reading your stuff on your profile that, you've been an active anti-racist for a very long time. This isn't, new for you in the post-George Floyd era, like it is for some people. But what actually did turn the light on for you? Like, what makes you emerge from, like you said, that white Texas, deep Southern, entrenched upbringing, to just woke? Yes. Like you're really, you're aware, you're no longer living in this place of, unconscious movement through society where racism isn't real. Like you actually do recognize it, you know it, and you've come from this place. So how does someone like you come out of Texas, and where was the turning point for you?
I wish I had one answer. Like I believe June of 2020 is going to be an answer for a lot of people on their turning point. I wish I had one. But I can tell you big pivotal moments very quick, and where I turned into social justice. So I went to college at Baylor University. So I got out of my white bubble to go to a different kind of white bubble. Yeah. And when it's a Baptist university down here, and they kicked a man who was gay in seminary out. And it kind of woke up the stirring of me of like, a lot of things are right in the world, and I want to focus on this. And it meant becoming something much more politically different than the people I grew up with and were surrounded by. And then I met my husband and moved to Austin. And so in Austin, Austin doesn't have a lot of, like, it's a very white city, but I had some friends who were Black. And Obama, that was the time when Obama was running for president. And I really started to just listen. And I listened. And I also saw I had a front row seat with my friends who were Black watching Obama experience racism. We all know the racism he experienced running for president.
Yeah.
And to have that and to have friends, and that's why it's so important to have diverse friend groups, is like to hear their experience, hearing these things, like this would never have happened to Bush or Bill Clinton or any white man who'd run. Like, the things that they are saying is so unfair. So to me, that was a huge wake up point for me. And I was young, and my husband and I just started listening. I have to be honest, it was just listening and noting, like, okay, this movie has no Black people in it, and it's one of our favorite movies. What does that say about the unconscious bias we were raised with? And then really, I'll tell you, the biggest pivotal moment for me was coming to Dallas. I worked at an amazing organization for years. I still work with them as a consultant, but they're called Momentous Institute, and they work with the social emotional health for children. Mm-hmm. And there were incredible Black therapists there who I became close friends with. And we had this report where we started just talking about all the things that they experience in life. And I sat at the table of the equity committee and listened to some of these beautiful friends of mine, tell me, who have PhDs, who have this incredible, every credential you could ask for, and experience the most barbaric treatment. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it was for me. So I've always been an empathetic person. So I've started just soaking this up and really listening, and it just became clear and clear to me, and it will for the rest of my life. Yeah. It's a never ending journey. I haven't made it. I'm not, you're not suddenly anti-racist overnight. It's a journey, and it's something I will never stop learning from. And I feel like I'm just being more empathetic, and listening has really opened my eyes to it all.
So is that when you kind of created Moxie Mouth, or is that something? Tell me about Moxie Mouth. It's your marketing consultancy.
Sure.
When did you create that, and describe it for everybody so that they understand how it's unique and different?
Sure. It's a perfect pivot, because I was the chief marketing officer at Momentous or Momentous Institute. And there I was really, really, I just found myself completely pulled to the equity work. And we did some work with the community, because we had a golf tournament, a PGA Tour event golf tournament. So we did a lot of work in the community, especially with the Black community. And I became so aware to the inequities in Dallas. And so while I was working there, I had a lot of roles and different things. And I thought, I really want to focus on this piece. I don't want to be, as a mentor once said, shouting into a megaphone backwards. I don't want to be trying to do all this in every facet. I want to take one facet of what I like to do and what I want to do. Like, I want to change. I want to be part of the change in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to hone in on this work. How can I take my marketing expertise and be actively anti-racist at all times using it? Right. So Moxie Mouth is a marketing consulting firm. For face value, it's a marketing consulting firm. Right. But what we do is bring stuff I picked up and developed during my career, which is building narratives that are respectful about clients, straying away from poverty porn, us versus them dichotomies, all these tropes that are very, very normalized in the philanthropic world. You get emails with sad children and mostly children of color, and it's asking mostly white donors to give a lot of money. So there's some savior complexes in there too. So I learned throughout my career, and especially at Momentous, that there are ways to do this work and this fundraising that isn't, that it doesn't have to rely on that. You can do this in a way that you work with clients, more client focused, more strengths based. The clients, I always operate at Moxie Mouth from the idea of everything we put out there. If the client, the end client, the person who is seeking services at a nonprofit is reading or writing, mm-hmm. Is what they're reading, writing, and seeing really a true depiction of what they're experiencing? Or are we making someone look really sad? Or when they're not, they're like, that's not me. That's not what I feel like. Or don't write that about me in a marketing newsletter. So that is where I come from. So I work with really cool clients who are ready to move in that direction. And I'm surprised to say in Dallas, there are a lot of them who really want to move in that direction, who are like, I don't like this old fundraising philosophy. And we can't get to the issues that we're trying to solve. This is the biggest thing in Moxie Mouth. You cannot get to the issues you're trying to solve if you're in a cycle of perpetuating them. Right. If you're sitting here saying that, Black and brown kids are poor and don't have the same access to education, but you're saying it in a way just to get money, you're not doing any service to solving the mission that you have. So I believe it. I believe a lot of nonprofits stall their own mission, and my goal is to help them like move it forward and actually solve, like go really make big strides in the problems they're trying to solve.
That is awesome. So
thank you.
Clearly that, the anti-racism actions that you can take, in the marketing world, because a lot of, this is about racism at work and helping organizations or helping people leaders understand how they can take anti-racist actions in their spheres of influence. So it's really awesome that you can present that perspective in marketing and communications. Let's talk a little bit about your article that you wrote, Meggie. It was called "White People Uprooting Racism in Our Inner Circles," and you're speaking directly to them, right? They need to do this work.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, and I would really love to hear your take on it.
Thank you. That was an interesting article to write. It came from a moment of passion. I had a conversation with my parents, which I talked about in there, and it wasn't particularly about racism. There was a piece of it. My parents are, again, more progressive than most, I must say. So it doesn't matter. I still needed to talk about it with them. And they actually, from that conversation, went and were taking anti-racism courses, and they're super cool and they want to grow. So the conversation started from that. And then it started, once I had this conversation with my parents and about our differences politically, we really came to a place where I was like, dang, we actually have a lot in common. And they just had never listened to, it become such a taboo topic to talk about racism, politics. And I see it so often in white families. So when we had that, I was like, dang, that was hard, but that was easy. That was hard, but it was ultimately something we could have talked about continuously for the last 10 years instead of doing all this. And we had similar conversations with a lot of family members. And then what I kept seeing when I told people that was like, oh, that's brave. I would never do that. And I'm like, but you're white and we need to. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, I get it, but I can't do that with my family. And, just like we went to talk to each other. And I came to a place where I'm like, why aren't we willing to risk more to do? Like, the risk for us is low key. Like, we're not risking our lives like Black people are every day. We're not risking our careers. There's so much that y'all are that Black people are risking by just speaking out loud. And here we are, we can't have conversations at our dinner table. Yeah. Come on. And this is to myself. This is a conversation I have with myself. Kind of get your stuff together, girl. You've got to start having these conversations. So I started telling friends, I see your point and too bad. You need to talk about it. And so I said, you know what? I think I'm anti-racist, but I'm not, I don't know how to talk about it with people who aren't in the same boat as me, or my parents are Trump voters. I'm not going to talk to them about it. You're not going to do any healing, and you can't just read books and think you're anti-racist. We got to do this work. And it cannot be on the shoulders of Black people. Black people cannot be the ones educating our racist uncles about racism and how it exists. It's not all on shoulders of people of color or Black people in this instance. It's just not. And it doesn't mean don't do things uninformed. Don't go have conversations when you haven't listened, but it's our job as white people who are even a little bit have even ventured into the anti-racism space to listen and start relaying that message and stopping racism as we see it, nipping it in the bud at our dinner tables in our regular conversations. And you know what? If you don't talk to your racist aunt for a year, then that's the consequence of it. But we have to lead by example. So
yeah, too many people have fallen silent at this time, even, right? It's for people like yourself to be speaking out, but then there's a whole cohort of people who are afraid to speak out. They might feel like, I'm not racist, this doesn't involve me, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. They're worried about that misstep as well.
Yes. And I'll try this metaphor. Let's see if this works. So the movie In and Out, I don't know if you've ever seen it, that Pixar movie. And if you haven't seen it, every feeling they have is a little orb that comes out, this little orb, and it's happy, joy. And so I think with white people, more particularly, they get this feeling. So this orb of discomfort comes in. They hear something like racism, and they're like, whoa, what do I do with this? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them send it down the chute of not my problem, doesn't affect me. So that's normalizing it, right? And then some people say, yeah, I see it's a problem that really makes me uncomfortable, but I'm going to justify it. So you're not just normalizing it, you're perpetuating it. So it goes down the perpetuating chute. And then what white people need to be doing is taking it, being like, whew, Okay, I feel that. I see that. It's uncomfortable. Yeah, feelings, a lot of other feelings come up for me, but I need to unpack this. I need to unpack this and get over my own discomfort and see where it's coming from and not send it down the normalizing chute or the perpetuating chute, but let's be actively anti-racist. Let's break this up. So
That's awesome. So what's next for you, Meggie, in terms of your anti-racist journey? What will you be doing in the next or in the near future?
Yeah. So I'll keep speaking up. I think writing is one of my callings, always has been. So I hope to write more articles but I'm very conscious of not taking up space where there should be Black voices right now. So I try to be loud where I can where I should be in a supportive way. So on LinkedIn, I keep talking and writing articles but I do plan to, I've already ramped it up in my business, like really asking companies how they're doing in it and trying to, basically I've made a promise to myself that I won't work with companies who aren't actively seeking equity work. Yeah. And so in that sense, I'm looking forward to connecting companies with DEI experts and consultants like yourself and others who do this work, because so as a principal in my business, I will not work with any more businesses that aren't actively pursuing this. And I don't mean a statement. I don't mean, putting more people of color in your marketing material. I mean, like, are you in this work? Do you have a DEI consultant? I think it is the top investment organizations need to make right now. Yeah. So that's one way I am doing this. And then I'm just seeing where I can plug in and be helpful and be supportive and be a voice that's not, just trying to take up space or monetize anything off this big movement right now, but just to be supportive and, yeah. And so one other way I'll break this because I haven't gotten there yet, but I've decided also to pivot my work and volunteer work into getting more women of color into office. Awesome. And so I am currently undergoing some campaign training and things like that. So eventually something I might do through my company, but for now volunteering and not just women of color, but more focus on women of color because there's such a shortage in office across all levels of government. Yeah. And that's honestly my passion is to get that happening. So however I can work and volunteer in that space is what I'm hoping to go into a little more.
Well, whatever you can do to get your parents and others down south to not vote Trump in the upcoming election, try to do that too, Meggie. You are an awesome anti-racist advocate, and it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. If anybody wants to get in touch with Meggie, you can reach her at moxiemouthstrategies.com. She's also available on Twitter at Meggie272. And of course, you can reach me at allthingsequitable.ca and or at JB_Equitable on Twitter. It has been a pleasure. Don't forget to click the like, share, and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you on another episode. Thank you so much for coming, Meggie.
Thank you, Janelle. It's such an honor to be here. I appreciate you and all the work you do.
I appreciate you. Keep doing what you do.
Awesome. Thank you. Absolutely.
All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.